I'm Gary Rosen, the editor of Wall Street Journal Weekend Review, and we're here today with Jonah Lehrer, who's written our cover story for this Saturday. It's called How to Be Creative. Hi, Jonah.
Hi, Gary.
So this is a very provocative piece, and I have to say it surprised me a little bit. You insist from the start that there's no such thing as a creative type. We shouldn't be intimidated, we lesser mortals, by people like Steve Jobs and Bob Dylan.
Yeah, that's been one of the long-standing myths of creativity, that it's some kind of all or none phenomenon, and you either got it or you don't. That you're the Pablo Picasso or the man on the street who can't invent anything. And I think what you discover when you look at creativity from the perspective of the brain is that the imagination is embedded very deep in our programming code, that we all create all the time. And we can all get better at it. That it's not some rare talent reserved for the lucky few. It's something we all share.
Well, so you make this interesting distinction, though, among the kinds of problems that we have to approach with our creativity. And it seems like the advice for doing that differs depending on the problem. So what are those kinds of problems?
Yeah, the larger point here is that for too long, really for thousands of years, we've been thinking of creativity as a single mode of thought. The imagination is a single thing. What neuroscience adds to the conversation is it demonstrates that creativity is really a catch-all term for a variety of distinct thought processes. And the kind of creativity we should employ, we should use, should depend on the creative problem in hand. And there are a variety of distinct creative problems which require distinct creative processes. One kind of creative problem requires moments of insight. These are these big epiphanies. They feel like revelations. There are two defining features of moments of insight. The first defining feature is that the answer comes out of the blue. It comes when we're on a walk. It comes when we're in the warm shower. It comes when we're playing a game of ping pong. It comes when we least expect it. The second defining feature of a moment of insight is that as soon as the answer arrives, we know it's the right answer. So it comes attached with this feeling of certainty. Now, this is a reliable phenomenon. You can generate it in the lab, and it turns out to rely on a specific kind of brain activity, a very specific set of processes inside your head. And sure enough, when we think we need a moment of insight, we should act differently than when we're solving a different kind of creative problem.
So you talk about one especially vivid instance of this, the inventor Arthur Frey, who had an interesting experience at work at 3M, and it led him to an unexpected invention.
Yeah, so he was able to connect two seemingly unrelated dots. On the one hand, there was this engineer named Sheldon Silver who had come up with a very, very weak adhesive, a very weak glue. And it had been sitting on the shelf at 3M for 6 or 7 years because, who knows what to do with a very weak glue? The purpose of a glue is to hold stuff together. What do you do with a glue that's so weak it doesn't hold anything together? So no one knew what to do with this glue. Arthur Frey had heard about the glue. He'd been to various tech presentations about it, but nothing had occurred to him. Then he also liked to sing in this church choir, but he had this really frustrating thing happen to him every Sunday, which is be singing in the church choir and have all these bookmarks in his choral book, and the bookmarks kept on falling out. And so he realized that he needed some way to get the bookmarks to stay in, but not to destroy the pages. And then one Sunday, in the midst of a particularly boring sermon, he had his big epiphany. He had this moment of insight. He realized that he could create a bookmark with this very weak glue, and after a few months of chemical tinkering, the product that came out of that is the Post-it note, which is, in essence, a square bookmark with a very weak glue backing.
So in talking about that category of problem, which you classify as being one of insight or epiphany, you suggest that people figure out how to pull back, relax, hot shower, a drink, some kind of distracting activity. But this other class of problem you talk about really has to do with focus and determination and working hard. You talk about this famous graphic designer, Milton Glaser, and his great achievement, but it came in a very different way from Arthur Frey's.
Yeah, the crucial way to diagnose the second kind of creative problem is to rely on what psychologists call feelings of knowing. This is a very mysterious mental phenomenon, but it turns out that people have this uncanny ability to know, to sense when they can get to an answer, even though they haven't found the answer yet. So a classic example of a feeling of knowing is when a word's on the tip of your tongue. You meet someone on the street and you know their name, but you just can't quite place it. And on the one hand, this is kind of annoying. It's an annoying mental hiccup. But on the other hand, it's kind of a profound mystery, because how do you know their name if you don't actually know it? Well, this is where feelings of knowing come in handy. That you've got this feeling of knowing, this hunch that if you just spend the next 5 minutes or 20 minutes, you will eventually recover this person's name. Now, when it comes to creative problems, feelings of knowing are also very important. So let's say you're working on a problem and you got this sense that you can find the answer, that you keep on the sense that you're making progress. Well, when you've got these feelings of knowing, the best advice science can give you right now is to keep on working, to chug coffee, to chug Red Bull, to drink that triple espresso, to do whatever you need to do to stay chained to your desk, because the answer will eventually come to you. That feeling of knowing will eventually become real knowledge. And in the case of Milton Glaser, what happened was he'd been given this assignment by the New York State Tourist Board to come up with a slogan, a nice graphic image that featured the slogan, "I love New York." So he spent a couple days in the project, came up with a neat graphic image, turned it in, but then he had this nagging sense that he could get something better, that a more perfect design was out there. So he kept on working on the problem, thinking about it. Then one day he was stuck in a taxi in midtown traffic in Manhattan, gets out his pad and paper and continues to draw. And then boom, right there is where he comes up with the very iconic, it's probably the most widely imitated work of graphic art in the world, graphic design in the world, the I Heart New York logo. And that came to him in the taxi.
Jonah, it seems like a big piece of general advice from your research is that we very often focus too much, have too much expertise, have too many preconceptions when we approach problems that demand some creativity. You have this charming anecdote about Yo-Yo Ma as a young student trying to play a piano, or rather a cello concerto, that seemed to his teachers to be something that was literally unplayable, but he managed to get through it. So what does the attitude of someone like Yo-Yo Ma have to do with how we should approach creativity in general?
Well, there's this great quote from Pablo Picasso that every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist when you grow up. And I think that's absolutely true. I mean, this helps explain why, we allude briefly in the sidebar to this neat study done where it shows when you prime people to think like a 7-year-old, to think like a little kid, all of a sudden they do much better on these various tests of creativity. That there is something about the childish mindset, about, instead of worrying about all the mistakes you're making, about all the reasons you shouldn't do it, kids just go ahead and do it. And that, in a sense, reckless attitude turns out to be really, really important for creativity. That in many instances, we are held back by our inner censor, by that voice in the back of our head telling us all the reasons we shouldn't do something, when in reality, we should just do it.
Well, thank you, Jonah. We're delighted to have the excerpt in Weekend Review. And the book, again, is Imagine How Creativity Works by Jonah Lehrer. It's full of useful information about how all of us can be more creative. For Wall Street Journal Weekend Review, I'm Gary Rosen.